Good afternoon, and a very, very warm welcome to all Somervillians and friends who are here to celebrate the life of a remarkable woman, Liz Cooke. The fact that there are more than 300 people with us in person in college today, and that there are literally hundreds who are joining us from all corners of the world via the live stream, is a testament to just how special she was. Thank you for being here this afternoon. But our deepest thanks must go to Ollie, Nancy and John, not just for being here, but for sharing Liz with us. And we're especially delighted that Nina is here and the young Liz Cooke, known as Betty. I had the privilege of having a cuddle with Liz Cooke earlier, which was wonderful. Many people would say that they love Somerville, but Liz gave her life to this college. Hers was a labour of love. She worked 7 days a week, morning, noon and night, connecting with alumni and connecting them to each other, rekindling friendships, sometimes fostering friendships. She knew the college inside out, but most importantly, she knew the people, the students, academic and non-academic staff, and of course, our alumni. She loved our community, and it's no exaggeration to say that she created our alumni community. She transformed alumni relations for Somerville, but also for the wider university. Liz was a scholar and an intellectual. She was a historian, proud of our own history. Her depth of knowledge about the college and its people was second to none. She had an amazing memory. She not only remembered names, matriculation dates, subjects and friendship groups, she remembered the joys, the sadness, the challenges that people had encountered during their lives. She was interested in each person and made them feel special. She understood the value of friendship. Liz cared deeply about the well-being of individuals, but also of our community and our college as a whole. She always wanted us to excel academically and in every other way. She cared about our past, our present, and our future. As a colleague, she was gentle but firm. She demanded the best of us. You always knew when Liz didn't really agree with an idea. Like many, I sought her counsel, and I miss those confidential conversations about difficult issues. Having said that, Liz's voice and her influence have not disappeared. I often think, what would Liz have said? And I act accordingly. I sometimes still go into her office expecting her to be there, sitting at her desk, or organising a meeting, or on the phone to an alumni. She's not there, but her presence is. Liz had great dignity. She was wise, she was kind, and she radiated warmth. She had enormous energy, and she was great company. She was elegant, she was beautiful inside and out. Indeed, she loved beauty in art, in opera, and of course, in her garden. She was a very private person who made herself accessible to all. She was the quiet, beating heart of Somerville. She embodied our values. Liz was a quintessential Somervillian and our greatest ambassador. We owe her a debt of gratitude that it's impossible to repay. We are blessed that she was part of our lives. We're going to learn so much about Liz this afternoon. There will certainly be smiles, there may be tears, but it's a wonderful opportunity for us to celebrate her life, her extraordinary devotion to our community, with eloquent recollections, beautiful words, and glorious music. So with that, we will begin with music, a hymn, and I invite you all to stand.
Oh, The last time I spoke in front of this many people was, I think, at Liz's wedding. The service was going well and I was sitting in the row behind her when there was a pause in the proceedings, a rather awkward silence. And Liz leant back and whispered, "Yellow marker." "I'm sorry," I said. "You're reading from the yellow marker," she confirmed. Well, opening the good book at the yellow marker wasn't a problem, but trying to establish the exact start and finish points of the text was slightly more tricky. Thankfully, I've had a little more warning today. Liz was born 1 month before the end of the Second World War, a time of peace and optimism. And then, 2 years and 9 months later, on this very day actually, April the 27th, I was born, and Liz had a brother. We grew up in a small house in Finchley, where our father was a teacher at the Frown Barnet Grammar School, and where Liz and I both attended the local convent. Then, when Liz was 7 or 8, we moved to Cambridge to live with our grandmother in her home in Glisson Road. And it was here that I have one of my first memories. It was of a nearly disastrous house fire. Our grandmother, a notorious and alarmingly incompetent cook, had set fire to a frying pan. The flames were licking towards the kitchen ceiling, and my mother and grandmother were panicking, not knowing how on earth to put out an oil fire. And then, through the door to the garden, came Liz to the rescue, armed with a small plastic bucket, which she'd filled with sand from our sandpit. And that was Liz, intelligent, capable, and efficient. A few years later, we moved to King's Lynn. Liz attended a convent in Swaffham, and I was sent to a boarding school in Hunstanton. We'd often spend our school holidays in our grandmother's new home here, which benefited from a distant sea view, usually quite bleak. I was unable to swim at this stage, but Liz was a good swimmer, and I can remember watching with admiration as she would swim with determination up and down the seashore in the cold North Sea waters of the Wash. The school years were, for me, I will admit, a slight nightmare. Whatever small academic achievements I may have had, they were always completely overshadowed by Liz. O-levels, A-levels and S-levels in those days, and culminating, of course, in her scholarship and entrance to Somerville. Later, in the summer of 1966, I was at a boarding school about half an hour away from here, and I was lucky enough to have been left a gift in the will of a great uncle, which enabled me to purchase a small second-hand sports car, a Triumph Spitfire convertible in white. It was my last term, and I'd hidden it in one of the master's garages. This was an offence punishable with expulsion, so it was with some trepidation that I approached my head of house, a boy I didn't know particularly well, in an attempt to convince him that if he put all the boarders to bed early on a Saturday night, we could jump into the car and be in Somerville by 10 o'clock and meet with Liz and all her new friends, mainly girls, I told him. It was not a particularly difficult sell. And what a summer we enjoyed. Not only did we meet Liz and her Somerville friends, but we also met James Cooke, who Liz went on to marry and who became Molly's father. And I couldn't help noticing that Liz had developed a new interest in food, cooking, and fine cuisine. This was quite surprising, as up to this point, I seem to remember that Liz's favourite meal had always been chips with vinegar, the latter often taken straight from the bottle. So now, for the first time, I saw Liz, my sister, as glamorous, impossibly sophisticated, and completely at home in the place she loved for the rest of her days. Later that summer, I received my own exam results, 4 passes at A-level, but after Liz's success, I have no recollection of any kind of praise or congratulations from friends or family. In fact, the only recognition came from my headmaster, who sent me a telegram, the only one I've ever received, and I still have it. It simply read, "Greenwood, you must have been even more surprised than we were." Liz heartily agreed. Liz's homes were always a great joy, from elegant flats in London to a lovely cottage in Charlbury, and then, of course, Tulip Tree House and the magnificent garden, which became her pride and joy. Liz at Great Chew has provided me with so many wonderful memories of family weekends, fabulous meals, film nights in the bothy, and numerous visits to garden centres and antique shops. I miss Liz every day. I miss her humour and good sense, and I know how thrilled, and I think not a little surprised she would be to see just how many friends and colleagues are taking part here today. So thank you.
My first reading is from Cicero on friendship. But friendship embraces innumerable ends. Turn where you will, it is ever at your side. No barrier shuts it out. It is never untimely and never in the way. I'm not now speaking of the ordinary and commonplace friendship, delightful and profitable as it is, but of that pure and faultless kind, such as was that of the few whose friendships are known to fame. For friendship adds a brighter radiance to prosperity and lessens the burden of adversity by dividing and sharing it. Seeing that friendship includes very many and very great advantages, it undoubtedly excels all other things in this respect, that it projects the bright ray of hope into the future and does not suffer the spirit to grow faint or to fall. Again, she who looks upon a true friend looks, as it were, upon a sort of image of herself. Wherefore friends, though absent, are at hand, though in need, yet abound, though weak, are strong, and, harder to say still, though dead, are yet alive. So great is the esteem on the part of their friends, the tender recollection, and the deep longing that still attends them. And my second reading is No Mourning by Request by Winifred Holtby. Come not to mourn for me with solemn tread, clad in dull weeds of sad and sable hue, nor weep because my tale of life's told through, casting light dust on my untroubled head. Nor linger near me while the sexton fills my grave with earth, but go gay garlanded, and in your halls a shining banquet spread, and gild your chambers all with daffodils. Fill your tall goblets with white wine and red, and sing brave songs of gallant love and true, wearing soft robes of emerald and blue. And dance as I your dances oft have led, and laugh as I have often laughed with you, and be most merry after I am dead.
Like everyone here, I mourn the loss of a friend, but I'm speaking in my capacity as the college historian, and also as having served for 30 years until my retirement in 2009 as the governing body representative on the committee of the Somerville Association. For 22 of these years, I overlapped with Liz, so was well placed to observe her impact on the association and the sheer hard work which underpins the events and services which we take for granted. The meetings, reunions, degree day lunches, Gaudies, publications, regional and professional and year groups, the forging of links between the association and current students, the annual commemoration of the recently dead. Many of these developments were Liz's own initiative, and none of them could have been achieved without her encouragement and support. She was a natural facilitator. Her encyclopedic knowledge of the ever-increasing membership of the association, invaluable in identifying suitable people who might be willing, or at least persuadable, to chair meetings or speak at them, to serve on committees, to liaise with year groups, to write for the various college publications. Anyone who has ever had their arm twisted by Liz will know how exceptionally skilled she was at it, as many past presidents of the association could doubtless attest. Her name does not appear in the college history, which was published in 1996,
In any subsequent history, she would play a key role. From its earliest days, Somerville has relied heavily on the affection and loyalty of its alumni. This goodwill was put severely to the test, just as Liz was in process of taking over secretaryship of the association from Mary Keane, when in February 1992, the governing body voted to open the college to men. It was a hugely controversial decision, and for reasons beyond the governing body's control, and which for a long time they were not at liberty to divulge, it was taken to a strict deadline and without prior consultation. When the news broke, in a blaze of media publicity, the student body was understandably furious and mounted a spirited resistance which, though it did not succeed in reversing the decision, did delay its implementation for a year. The college's alumni were equally outraged, many of them vociferously. Somervillians have always prided themselves on plain speaking, and on this occasion there was some very plain speaking indeed. While the principal and fellows were preoccupied with attempting to pacify their revolting students and with the legal and administrative complications of their decision, Liz, who had had no part in the decision, had been given less than 48 hours' notice of its announcement and remained in the dark about governing body's motivation, was left almost single-handedly to confront the wrath of the alumni. I have no idea what her own views on the subject were, though she may have shared them with more intimate friends. But for the next few years, she worked patiently to defuse an explosive situation, coaxing the disaffected back into college, maintaining contact with the unreconciled, assuring them that whatever their views, they were always welcome in her office. And in subsequent years, she worked equally hard to make the association welcoming to the new generation of Somerville men. That it emerged from this crisis the thriving and supportive organisation that it is today, the college owes in the greatest possible measure to Liz. The fact that she herself was a Somervillian through and through helped, of course. So many of the qualities which we admire and like to flatter ourselves that we possess were hers in abundance. She was clever, principled, quirky, unsentimental, generous, straightforward, and very brave. She was fun to meet and fun to work with. Last year, in this hall, at one of the last college events which she was able to attend, I watched her, seemingly effortlessly at work, greeting everyone, making introductions, ensuring that the microphones were working, the elderly comfortably placed, special dietary needs accommodated, and I said something to her about how tiring she must find it. Her response was utterly characteristic. I just like talking to Somervillians. This surely was the secret of her success and why so many of us came to love her.
Strictly speaking, for the last 10 years, I have been head of the Development and Alumni Relations Department at Somerville, but I think we all know who was the moving spirit. I always say Liz invented alumni relations. I hope it's not hubristic to say we are the envy of the university and the top echelons of Oxford watch keenly what we do, all down to Liz and her ingenuity. I thought you might like to know what has come to light about the recruitment of Liz to the role to which she gave more than 35 years of her life. Looking back at the correspondence, it seems there was a concerted effort to land Liz, and it was Daphne Park, of course, who masterminded it. Trust a spy to recruit. A briefing note to Daphne about Liz from another Somervillian, who will remain unnamed, said the following: "She is by temperament high-powered, by profession a barrister. The best approach would be to ask her to lunch, saying, casually, you might have something to offer her in her spare time, without saying quite what. Then, once you have her there, you can exercise your fatal charm, slowly reveal the full horror of what you have in mind. Having more or less hooked her before you mention the appeal, let alone appeal secretary. So, having taken the bait and accepted, Liz replied, if I can be of use to Somerville, I shall be delighted. It wasn't really a job to her. It was a calling, but one which gave immense pleasure. At our annual review meetings, which largely consisted of me begging Liz never, ever to step down, Liz would often talk about the joy she still felt walking into college under the red brick arches every single morning. In turn, Liz deployed the same skills and unique charm to recruit the rest of us, which probably includes all of you. Her natural curiosity and interest in people's lives, family histories, and their lives after Somerville was completely authentic. She knew exactly what to ask each of us and made it impossible to turn down any invitation to engage or to serve. Her kindness, the brilliance of her mind, her ability to listen, and that phenomenal retaining memory. Liz's sheer social network before Facebook was even imagined. The mind maps or Venn diagrams in her brain of friendship circles and business connections. She was always right about who would be interested in sitting next to who over dinner. She understood that the contribution to the alumni community comes in myriad ways of engaging. And there were no lengths to which she wouldn't go to create an interesting program for our alumni, from the now infamous Swan Hellenic cruises, to the multiple book clubs, to a Somerville Welsh National Opera production of Rhonda Rips It Up. So incredibly imaginative. And she revelled in Somervillian achievements, sending congratulations on every accolade. She lived by the assumption that there was a Somervillian in the thick of it, whatever it was, and she was always right. She enjoyed nothing more than entertaining alumni back at college. At one point she thought she entertained about 180 people for lunch every year, and we joked about eating for Somerville. Her curiosity about alumni extended to her colleagues, regardless of age. Within our long-serving team, she built a rapport and friendships across generations. She was especially fond of, curious about, and somehow delighted by the younger ones. She was never afraid to challenge, and perhaps surprisingly, she was impossible to shock. At work, Liz was endlessly amused by us and endlessly amused us. Her last 10 years were marked by the special partnership she had with her job share, Lisa Gigax. Far too prosaic a phrase, I think, to describe such a stylish, dynamic, successful and close team. Lisa was another of Liz's recruits, perhaps her most important, as she trusted her life's work to her. As ever, Liz's judgment was spot on. Both Liz and Lisa's warm smiles and effortless hosting belied immense efforts and work. Liz, as a team, your work family, we remember you with gratitude and can only aspire to live by your remarkable example. We all miss and we love you.
Bist du bei mir, geh ich mit Freuden zum Sterben und zu meiner Ruhe, zum Sterben Ach, wie vergnügt wär so mein Ende. Es drückt in deine schönen Hände mir die getreuen Augen zu. Bist du bei mir, geh ich mit Freuden zum Sterben und zu meiner Ruh, zum Sterben und zu meiner Ruh.
Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. In this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. No man has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. And we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love, because we love him, because he first loved us. And this commandment we have from him, that he who loveth God love his sister also.
Liz's godson Sebastian is unfortunately unable to be here. I'm Benjamin Thompson, a history fellow, and I worked with Liz for nearly 30 years on the Somerville Association Committee. What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We die with the dying. See, they depart, and we go with them. We are born with the dead. See, they return, and bring us with them. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. So, while the light fails on a winter's afternoon in a secluded chapel, history is now and England. With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. Quick, now, here, now, always. a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one.
The warden rapped upon the table. A welcome silence fell upon the hall. A speaker was rising to propose the toast of the university. She spoke gravely, unrolling the great scroll of history, pleading for the humanities, proclaiming the Pax Academica to a world terrified with unrest. Oxford has been called the home of lost causes. If the love of learning for its own sake is a lost cause everywhere else in the world, let us see to it that here, at least, it finds its abiding home. Magnificent, thought Harriet, but it is not a war. And then, her imagination weaving in and out of the spoken words, she saw it as a holy war, and that whole wildly heterogeneous, that even slightly absurd collection of chattering women fused into a corporate entity with one another, and with every man and woman to whom integrity of mind meant more than material gain. Defenders in the central keep of human soul, their personal differences forgotten in the face of a common foe. To be true to one's calling, whatever follies one might commit in one's emotional life, that was the way to spiritual peace. How could one feel fettered being the freeman of so great a city, or humiliated where all enjoyed equal citizenship?
We've heard a lot about Liz, and you will hear a little bit again from me of things that we may already have heard about. We know that Liz, of course, came up to Somerville from St Mary's School in Cambridge in 1963 with a scholarship to read history. 3 years later, she moved to London to read for the bar at the Middle Temple. She then practiced on the Midland Circuit as a criminal barrister. And in 1979, she and James bought Tulip Tree House in Great Tew. And a year later, Ollie was born. Liz then left the bar. Your fault, Ollie. I'm not sure how closely at this stage Liz kept in touch with Somerville, but we've heard how she was lured back by a combination of Dame Daphne Park and Mary Keane. And she was persuaded to become the secretary of the Somerville Appeal, and then 6 years later, when Ollie went to Radley as a boarder, Liz was able to take on the secretaryship of the ASM, or the Somerville Association as it is now called. Now that was the same year that I became the president of the ASM, and I'd served on the committee before. I thought I knew what I was in for. 2 meetings a year, one in London, one here, fairly calm job. But I was mistaken. Liz transformed the ASM, and she did this, as we've heard from Pauline, with tact, but also with determination. She revised the Constitution. We drew up a questionnaire. We invited Somervillians what they thought and pondered their returns. And she developed networks, which Nicola is going to describe to us. She organized workshops at Somerville on topics such as how to publish your first novel, or how to set up your own business. She embraced the idea of Somervillians joining together, as we've heard, on Swan's Hellenic cruises. Under her guidance and enthusiasm, the ASM reached out to more Somervillians and in new ways. Among the ASM files, I'm a historian, so I went to look at the archive, which is here at Somerville, and I found a list of the ASM events for the year 2004. I should say that there are no lists after that because it went digital, so the paper lists end in the year 2004. And in that year, there were meetings of the London group in the British Museum, of the City group at the offices of Warburg, Chemistry and Media Days at Somerville, a reunion in New York, a Swan Hellenic cruise, a literary luncheon in Somerville, and the annual commemoration service in the Gaudy. The list indicates, I think, how Liz had actually transformed the ASM. And she drawing Somervillians back to their college in ways that seemed to them to have meaning and purpose, as Nicola is going to describe now.
My first substantive contact with Liz was some 3 decades ago, when out of the blue, I was invited to lunchtime drinks for Somervillians working in the city of London, at what was then Warburg's. I was intrigued, as I had never come across anyone else from Somerville in the city. But the attent was well attended, and I even came across a colleague from Schroeder's, where I was then working, who I hadn't known was a Somervillian. I responded to Liz's call for volunteers to join the committee of a new city alumni group, and later became the chair. The city group, as Caroline has mentioned, was only one of many. The London group, lawyers, medics, media, public policy, teachers, all these were either started or enlivened by Liz and sustained by her unfailing drive and support, and, as we've already heard, her extreme talent for identifying new committee members and potential speakers, otherwise known as arm wrestling. But it was also great fun. The City Group mixed excellent speaking events and topical panels with health and careers evenings and even fashion. Liz never stopped referring back to the private evening the City Group held at Christian Louboutin, who makes the shoes with the famous red soles. She loved the goodie bag we got, containing a beautiful Louboutin scarf, and I am wearing my one today in her honour. And this was much more to Liz's taste than the plentiful champagne, which she did not drink, as always, since she was driving back to Great Tew. Working with Liz, I came to realise that the creation of the alumni groups was only one element of her extraordinary vision. She understood that creating an alumni community was truly a long game and depended on finding ways of making the college relevant to Somervillians over the whole of our lives, not relying on nostalgia or the relationships of our student years, important though these are. Other elements included touring the country, indeed the world, to meet Somervillians either individually or in groups, regular telephone calls to the many older Somervillians who could not travel, and the sad but important attendance at a great many funerals. When Liz invited me to that lunchtime event, she gave me a second Somerville life. It led not just to my role on the City Group, but to contributing to the Finance Committee on Investments and joining the Development Board. In other words, being involved in the college's future. Liz was also a great friend, not just to me, but also to my family. When our children were quite small, she invited my husband Gavin, me, and the 3 children to stay for a weekend at Great Tew, even giving a dinner party on the Saturday evening. There was no agenda. It was simply great fun, and we had a lovely time. As others have said, to all her activities, Liz brought enthusiasm, competence, and empathy. Whether for women or men, the most recent graduate, or her old ladies, as she used to call them, she cared about us. She was interested in us, and she loved Somerville, so we loved it too. And this made us ready to support the college, whether with money or in other ways. Liz wasn't the one asking for money, but she was absolutely the one who enabled others to do so successfully. Liz, you did extraordinary things for the college and for all of us, and I'm honoured to be here to acknowledge and share them. Caroline Barron wrote in her 1997 report as president of the then Association of Senior Members that it is Liz Cooke who makes all our plans come true. And I will now hand back to Caroline to share a personal memory of Liz.
I want to share with you a memory I have of Liz. It's a warm summer day in June 2016. There was to be an afternoon entitled Exploring the Heritage of the Parish Church of St. Michael in Great Tew, bringing together local historians to discuss the tombs and the wall paintings of the church. And I should say, although Liz was a Roman Catholic, she supported the Anglican Church in Great Tew very enthusiastically. And when I stayed with her, we always went to the parish church. Now, that was an event for the parish church, but Liz saw how to make it also a Somerville event. She enlisted Benjamin Thompson to bring some members of the college choir who would sing medieval music, and Benjamin would explain about it as part of the afternoon at the end of the day. And Liz also decided to raise money by selling lunch to Somervillians. So she invited Somervillians to come to lunch at her house and then to go to the afternoon. Liz's cuisine, as we've heard, was famous, and about 30 people signed up for the lunch before the event. And she served it in her garden. Luckily, we had a beautiful day, not like today. Over 100 people came in the afternoon to the talks and raised over £2,000 for the church, and Liz raised a sizable sum for Somerville. And then, in the evening, after it was all over, a few of us, perhaps a dozen, drifted back to Tulip Tree House, where Liz managed to turn the remains of the lunch that had been offered to the other Somervillians into supper for the 12 of us. And she found some lovely wine. She was good on wine. She found some lovely wine. And we sat about in her garden in twos and threes, gossiping quietly. Fireflies were circling overhead. Her wonderful herbaceous borders, the roses and the peonies were sort of nodding sleepily. There were a couple of cats. Liz was very keen on cats, skittered about amongst the herbaceous plants. And the light slowly faded, very, very slowly, and we sat happily. Liz was in her element, doing what she did so incredibly well. She was welcoming, she was organizing, she was cooking, she was fundraising, she was listening, she was laughing. And all that embraced in that wonderful garden that she had loved and created.
Now that there
The Glory of the Garden by Rudyard Kipling. Our England is a garden that is full of stately views, of borders, beds and shrubberies, and lawns and avenues, with statues on the terraces and peacocks strutting by, but the glory of the garden lies in more than meets the eye. For where the old thick laurels grow along the thin red wall, you'll find the tool and potting sheds, which are the heart of all, the cold frames and the hothouses, the dung pits and the tanks, the rollers, carts and drain pipes, and the barrows and the planks. And there you'll see the gardeners, the men and prentice boys, told off to do as they are bid, and do it without noise. For except when seeds are planted and we shout to scare the birds, the glory of the garden, it abideth not in words. And some can pot begonias, and some can bud a rose, and some are hardly fit to trust with anything that grows. But they can roll and trim the lawns and sift the sand and loam, for the glory of the garden occupieth all who come. Our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, "Oh, how beautiful," and sitting in the shade, while better men than we go out and start their working lives at grubbing weeds from gravel paths with broken dinner knives. There's not a pair of legs so thin, there's not a head so thick, there's not a hand so weak and white, nor yet a heart so sick, but it can find some needful job that's crying to be done, for the glory of the garden glorifieth every one. Then seek your job with thankfulness and work till further orders, if it's only netting strawberries or killing slugs on borders. And when your back stops aching and your hands begin to harden, you will find yourself a partner in the glory of the garden. Oh, Adam was a gardener, and God, who made him, sees that half a proper gardener's work is done upon his knees. So when your work is finished, you can wash your hands and pray for the glory of the garden, that it may not pass away. And the glory of the garden, it shall never pass away.
Gosh, quite nervous. Tough acts to follow. I wonder if this is how it feels like to be the alumni secretary on the eve of the Gordy. Mum would have loved to see you all here today, and writing these words, I was wondering whether this is the largest Somerville event that she directly instigated. Mum's life was, of course, inexorably interwoven with her work at Somerville. I think she would be quite offended by any attempt to actually try to codify her role here as work. Mum's engagement with Somerville is perhaps better encapsulated as being simply about the way she wanted to spend her life. That's, of course, not to say that she didn't treat her role with huge commitment and professionalism. She also invested hugely in her relationships with family and friends, alongside her many other interests and passions. But the fact that so many Somervillians are gathered today, having also shared so many wonderful messages about her, is a fantastic testament to her heartfelt belief that even as her health was waning, the way to do her job best was to be absolutely all in. We've been incredibly touched to read all the lovely messages. Some of my earliest memories of Oxford are of walking from school to Somerville at the end of the day to come and find Mum wandering into the college and always sensing this incredible sense of warmth and community that is so unique to this place. In many ways, I think it probably gave me a completely skewed vision of the modern workplace. A Somerville story from my childhood that I love dates to the time when answer machines still recorded messages on conventional tape. And unless you chose to restrict length, the tape would simply record until the end. Mum had called my dad to leave a cursory logistical message, but then failed to properly replace the receiver. What ensued was a recording my dad would later describe as a multi-hour deep dive into the Somervillian nerve centre. After hearing which, he announced, "I finally got it. Your job is basically making friends with people." The fact that Mum saw the world through the lens of Somervillian alumni took some getting used to. There were obvious manifestations, for example, the fastidious study of the New Year's honours list as soon as it was published, but also more subtle signs, such as the sense that in Mum's mind, every major national or global event should in some way be subject to some sort of objective pre-assessment of the number of Somervillians on opposing sides. Mum made an incredible commitment to Somerville. There's that fantastic statistic that in some years she managed to accrue more working lunches than there were working days. But of course, what happened when Mum left Somerville at the end of the day, or perhaps as often at the end of the evening, was a sort of decompression as she drove home to Great Chew and her other markedly more private life. I shouldn't give the wrong impression. This was not some serene cruise through West Oxfordshire, but more likely a white-knuckle ride along roads Mum had driven so many times she would claim she could do it with her eyes shut, which later in life, as her eyesight failed, started to become dramatically closer to reality. At terrifyingly high speed, in a car which not only had plants in it, but also growing out of it, all too often to the soundtrack of Meatloaf's greatest hits, played at a frighteningly high volume. Punctuation to the drive home would be provided by the occasional emergency stop to liberate a much-needed additional primrose, daffodil, or clump of snowdrops from a roadside verge. Always worth having a spade in the car, Ollie. Mum loved her house, as we've been talking about today, and her favourite dream, which she had frequently, involved discovering a hitherto unknown wing, a new blank canvas in which to indulge her love of hoarding, collecting, art, objects, books, films, china tea sets, jelly moulds, shells, the list goes on. She loved a good project. The detailed hand-stitched ornamental curtains of her bed, developed on patterns sketched in the V&A, and her ongoing research into whether it was possible to keep a house and all its contents entirely together using only araldite and milliput. But also the bedspread she quilted for Nancy and me over more than a decade and gave to us at our wedding. When this you see, remember me, lovingly embroidered in one corner. One tragedy of her death, at a relatively young 78, is that her great ambition to construct a fabulous shell grotto in her garden will most likely go unrealised. And with that, the justification for many summer and autumn holidays spent trawling beaches, almost indiscriminately collecting vast quantities of dead marine life. Mum loved to take holidays in Greece. It combined many of her core interests: scenery, the sea, history, archaeology, and of course, white wine. She especially liked to travel in the October half-term. So much more relaxing when everything's closed and the pedlos have all been chained up. Much easier to find shells without all those people in the way. At many points in her life, Mum talked about moving into Oxford, and one reason she resisted the convenience that change would have offered was that her house in Great Chew, whilst somewhere she loved to socialise and entertain, was also a place which took on almost monastic qualities, a kind of sanctuary of her own design. Therein perhaps lies Mum's contradiction, a profoundly sociable person, always caring and inquisitive, but who was also deeply content in her own company, and was perhaps at her most relaxed while gardening away for hours at a time, chatting to her cats and happily listening to Radio 4. For friends and family, Mum's love of her garden presented specific communication challenges, as anyone who ever tried to call her during gardening hours will attest to. Unfortunately, gardening hours would often stretch late into the night, often resulting in fairly comedy exchanges between me and my uncle. Have you managed to get through? No, have you? Only then to finally speak to Mum and have her retort, really, but I'm always in when you call. Nancy, Nina, Maxine and I would frequently arrive in Great Chew late on a Friday night to visit for the weekend. It would invariably be dark by the time we got there. I remember Nina once looking at me with a look of complete incredulity when I suggested that we went inside to look for Grandma. Don't be silly, Daddy, there's a full moon. Grandma will be weeding the borders. Mum's collections came into their own with the arrival of grandchildren. A highlight of Nina's weekends in Great Chew was their regular shell meeting, at which a whole system of classification was being co-authored around size, shape, colour and aesthetics, a topic impenetrable to anyone but the two of them. For Maxine's second birthday, we threw a tea party in Great Chew. Maxie loved a good cup of tea. As if on cue, Mum pulled out a fine china tea set that had never previously been used in her lifetime. We'd grown so used to seeing it hung on the wall that we'd assumed it was purely ornamental, and absolutely made her little granddaughter's day. All Mum's hoarding of china at once forgiven and justified in the ear-to-ear grin of a toddler. Another highlight of trips to see Grandma was our daughter's vain attempts, enthusiastically encouraged by Grandma, to make progress with the cats. Two deeply antisocial animals who, having been reared during lockdown with no company other than my mum, were absolutely terrified of children. A scenario which somehow both epitomised Mum's caring qualities and her somewhat mischievous sense of humour. I imagine most parents will sympathise with the stresses of trying to find the right present for a child. All too often, what seemed right when ordered a month prior to a birthday, no longer relevant or in vogue when the big day comes. Mum managed to judge gifts to perfection, often quite out of character. No one expected, for example, the arrival of a giant teddy bear, larger than Mum, which arrived for Nina's first birthday and was an instant success. Several years later, the bear has been joined by a posse of other oversized animals and has graduated to remain relevant as some kind of reading sofa for our little bookworm. More recently, she produced an antique inlaid writing bureau, which she'd clearly had an eye on for some time. Perhaps not the most immediately obvious present for a 6-year-old. Yet still, 2 years later, perhaps Nina's most treasured possession, and an amazing insight into Mum's precise assessment that in a small, overcrowded London flat, what her little granddaughter needed was a physical demarcation of her territory, somewhere to call her own, in which to store and collect her things. She'd identified a kindred spirit. One view of Mum's life could be that in many ways she liked things quite compartmentalised. Her time in Somerville, her time with family and friends, her time on her own, when she would often get quite grumpy about being bothered by the telephone. I like to think her descriptions of her house feeling like it had been invaded at Christmas were born from affection. I see Mum's, Sarah mentioned a Venn diagram earlier, and I think that's an interesting description. I see Mum's life as a highly diverse Venn diagram with lots of different areas of interest, connections, and enthusiasm. Somehow the common themes being Somerville and its amazingly diverse and varied community, and alongside that, Mum's uncanny ability to engage with people, places, and occasions without pretense or preconception on their own terms. Perhaps underlying this is that Mum's friendships and her extraordinary ability for empathy, sympathy, and enthusiasm for others always stemmed from a point of curiosity, genuine interest, and a natural ability to put people at ease, always speaking with people, especially young people, as equals, and wanting to learn about their passions and interests. Last year was a particularly tragic one, with the loss of our daughter Maxine preceding Mum's death by only a few months. It seemed quite unjust that towards the end of her life, when her health was failing, Mum should also outlive her granddaughter. We have a strong sense that Mum and Maxie both had big plans together and would have continued to have so much in common. A brilliant, can-do, adventurous spirit, a love of animals, and a tremendous passion for food. One image that Nancy and I take a lot of solace from over the last 6 months is that of Mum and Maxie somewhere enthusiastically tucking into a roast chicken dinner together. November of 2023 marked the arrival of our third daughter, Betty. Although Mum never got to meet her, she was delighted to know she was on the way. I'm sure she expected we would have a third girl. A mark of Mum's enduring affection for Somervillians young and old is that she would always refer to female alumni as the girls. Now standing here in this hall, sharing today with you all, it's wonderful to see so many of Mum's friends and colleagues who were part of her complex and varied Venn diagram. It also seems very fitting that we can share today with her strong-willed and determined granddaughters, including the young Elizabeth May Greenwood Cooke, sitting in the front row, in whom Mum's spirit and enthusiasm for life will hopefully and surely live on.